Chapter 4 The Pilgrim. Rockefeller's story was perfectly mirrored by the story of Colonel Edwin Drake. Having struck oil in Titusville and given rise to a billion-dollar global industry, Drake had not had the foresight to patent his drilling technique or even to buy up the land around his own well. He ended up in poverty, relying on an annuity from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania to scrape together a living and dying in 1880. James Corbett, How and Why Big Oil Conquered the World. The Corbett Report, June 10, 2017. In 1903, the cartel created the Pilgrim Society with chapters in New York and London. The purpose of the new clandestine organization was to further the plans of a new world order as conceived by Cecil Rhodes. Lord Nathan Rothschild was a member of the Society of the Elect, which had been created by Rhodes to bring the globe under the control of a group of elitists who would decide the future of the world in secret. The London Chapter. The London chapter of the Pilgrim Society, which was established under Lord Alfred Milner, was composed almost entirely of members of the Society of the Elect, the secret society created by Cecil Rhodes and Nathan Rothschild to forge a new world order. Lord Milner had risen in rank and privilege to become the first governor of the Transvaal and the Orange Free State in South Africa, and the administrator of the Rhodes Scholarships. The Pilgrims included Lord Rosebery, Lord Robert Brand, Lord Reginald Brett, Arthur Lord Balfour, Albert Lord Grey, and Lord Rothschild, along with John Jacob Astor, the New York real estate magnate, Alfred Bate, Rhodes's partner in the diamond business, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, the author of Sherlock Holmes, Philip Henry Kerr, 11th Marquis of Lothian and the British ambassador to the United States, H.G. Wells, noted novelist and historian, and Jan Smuts, legal advisor to Cecil Rhodes and future Prime Minister of the Union of South Africa, and Lord Nathan Rothschild. The elite group met monthly at the Carlton Hotel. The New York Chapter. The New York branch, which met at the Waldorf Astoria, was established by J.P. Morgan. It boasted such members as John D. Rockefeller, Andrew Carnegie, Jacob Schiff, former U.S. President Grover Cleveland, future U.S. President William Howard Taft, Mark Twain, Elihu Root, Thomas W. Lamont, Percy Rockefeller, William Rockefeller, Ogden Mills Reed, Otto Kahn, Andrew Mellon, W. B. Whitney, Cornelius Vanderbilt, Vincent Astor, Mortimer I. Schiff, Frank Vanderlip, Henry Davison, Charles D. Norton, Benjamin Strong, Nelson Aldrich, and Paul Warburg. The fact that the Pilgrims were controlled by the Rothschild money cartel was verified by the presence of Jacob Schiff and Paul Warburg at the monthly gatherings. Warburg, a prominent member of the Warburg Banking Consortium in Germany, which was allied to the House of Rothschild, had married Nina Loeb, the daughter of one of the founders of Kuhn, Loeb and Company, a financial firm tightly connected to Rothschild. The incredible importance of this exclusive dining club to the future of America became clear in 1910, when prominent Pilgrims, including Warburg, Vanderlip, Davison, Norton, Strong, and Aldrich, set off for Jekyll Island off the coast of Georgia to plan the formation of the Federal Reserve System. An elite society. The Pilgrims from the London and New York societies were welcomed guests at each other's clubs and shared in each other's efforts to advance a concept that they called the New World Order. The meaning of this phrase was clarified by William Lyon Mackenzie King, the Premier of Canada, in his dinner address to New York Pilgrims in 1912. King envisioned a future in which the world would be united in peace and harmony under an Anglo-American alliance. When victory and peace came, he prophesied, the peoples of the British Commonwealth and of the United States would be united more closely than ever, as all the nations who have united in the defense of freedom would remain united in the defense of mankind. The meetings were held in secret. No guests were allowed to attend. No minutes were kept. No financial records were disclosed. Proof of the commitment of members to the cause of their society came in 1919, when U.S. Pilgrim Irving T. Bush plunked down the funding for the Bush House in downtown London. Cut from Portland stone at a cost of $20 million, it was at the time the most expensive building in the world. To dispel any doubts about the purpose of the building, Bush commissioned the erection of a large statue at its entrance of two semi-naked men holding aloft the torch of liberty while brandishing two swords. One sword was emblazoned with lions and the other with eagles. The inscription read, "To the friendship of English-speaking peoples. For members only." 37 years after its founding, an obscure American journalist took notice of the clandestine club. In 1940, Sir Uncle Sam, Knight of the British Empire, a book that sold less than 500 copies, John Whiteford wrote, "There are several curious things about these Pilgrim functions. In the first place, there is present at these dinners an array of notables, such as it would be impossible to bring together under one roof for any other purpose and by any other society. Among the guests were John D. Rockefeller and J.P. Morgan, Thomas W. Lamont, and other members of the House of Morgan. We are entitled to know what the Pilgrim Society is, what it stands for, and who these powerful pilgrims are that can call out the great to hear a British ambassador expound to Americans the virtues of a united democratic front." The lack of public awareness of the workings of the Pilgrim Society through the years remains mind-boggling, since its members would come to include Harry Truman, John Foster Dulles, Allen Dulles, General George Marshall of the Marshall Plan, W. Averill Harriman, Joseph P. Kennedy, Henry Luce, founder of Time magazine, Henry Kissinger, Gerald Ford, Winston Churchill, Zbigniew Brzezinski, General Alexander Haig, William Paley, CBS president, Walter Cronkite, Sandra Day O'Connor, Elliot Richardson, George H.W. Bush, Paul Volcker, George W. Bush, and David Rockefeller. The Rockefeller Transformation. John D. may have been a reluctant pilgrim. Unlike the other members, he was neither a Freemason nor an ardent Anglophile. He was neither a socialist nor an advocate of free trade. He possessed little knowledge of the thought of John Ruskin or the writings of Helena Petrovna Blavatsky. But as soon as he joined the society, John D. began to undergo a mental and spiritual transformation that was just as dramatic as the change that the onset of alopecia had produced in his physical appearance. He turned his attention to global affairs and, together with Schiff, financed the Russo-Japanese War of 1904 to 1905. The funding permitted Imperial Japan to mount an attack against the Russians at Port Arthur, and within a year to decimate the Russian Navy. The purpose of the war was not to prop up the Japanese emperor, but rather to weaken Tsarist Russia. After the war, Rockefeller and the Rothschilds offered the Tsar $200 million for the control of the Russian oil fields and the concession for railroads from Tashkent to Tomsk and from Tehita to Polomoshna, and a grant of land on both sides of the prospective lines. When the Tsar declined the offer, Rockefeller and the Rothschilds began funding the Bolsheviks to mount a revolution. Rockefeller went on to fund the rebellion in China that led to the fall of the Qing dynasty in 1911. Oil for the lamps of China. Because of this funding, John D. gained the right to erect refineries and distribution centers so that Standard Oil came to like the lamps of China. These developments ominously provided a portent for the events of the 20th century. Rockefeller now realized that war could be created to serve his own economic ends. Millions of soldiers and civilians throughout the world would now die, not for the sake of their native lands, but rather for the financial interests of Standard Oil and the Rockefeller Empire. The Rockefeller Blessing. Like his fellow Pilgrims, John Dee now espoused the doctrine of social Darwinism. The growth of a large business is merely a survival of the fittest, he maintained when questioned about his success. Although he purportedly never joined a Masonic lodge, John Dee's luxurious summer estate in Forest Hills, Ohio, became transformed into a Masonic temple. In 1906, John Dee suddenly decided to reshape his image by hiring Ivy Ledbetter Lee as a publicist. Lee came up with the gimmick of having the old skinflint shell out dimes to adults and nickels to children whenever he appeared in public. After passing out the coins, Lee encouraged Rockefeller to say, "Bless you," to each recipient of his largesse. In this way, it came to appear that John Dee was a saintly figure who was dispersing communion wafers for the sake of human redemption. Once a scoundrel. Yet, despite Rockefeller's abandonment of his parochialism and the changes in his outlook and appearance, he remained the same ruthless oligarch he had been at the time of the Great Oil War of 1872. In addition to his oil refineries and distribution companies, John Dee owned coal mines throughout the country. When 9,000 of Rockefeller's miners went on strike in Ludlow, Colorado, to protest the onerous prices at the company stores and the $1.68 wages for a 12-hour workday, John Dee called in the state militia to mow down the strikers with machine guns. 19 miners were killed by the gunfire, while 4 women and 11 children burned to death in tents that had been soaked by Rockefeller's henchmen with kerosene. There was an immediate public outcry. John Dee's publicists now went into overtime. Publishers were paid to run stories in which Rockefeller became depicted as a warm-hearted and incredibly generous employer who looked over his workers with paternalistic affection. Accounts were circulated of John Dee redressing grievances from his workers, establishing state-of-the-art working conditions, and caring for widows and orphans. It was all hype, but it was gobbled up by millions of Americans who came to equate Rockefeller with model Christian ethics. Accepting semblance as reality, few Americans expressed alarm with Rockefeller proceeding to gain control of the nation's systems of finance, education, medicine, and government to pave the way for the new world order and the reign of his son, John Jr.